Hey everybody! In a follow-up to my vlog from last week, I'm going to be doing a list of 10 World War II fun facts. These are going to be from textbooks, from the internet, and a lot of them from my new favorite book. Nazi Germany was at war with lots of nations across the world, many of them major powers. You'd think that Hitler made a lot of declarations of war, right? Wrong. Nazi Germany only formally declared war on one nation, and that was the United States. Every American knows that we won World War II by dropping 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a common misconception that since we only had 2 bombs to drop on Japan, we would have not continued with a nuclear campaign against the Japanese if they hadn't surrendered after Nagasaki. But that's not the case. American military planners had plans for a third nuclear strike against Japan, and the target for that third nuclear strike would have been Tokyo. Many people remember World War II as being one of the first modern military conflicts, with advanced tanks and cars. As a result of this, many people don't realize that horses were still very much in evidence on the battlefield. We Americans don't really count horses as being important because they were used very little in the Pacific, but they were used very heavily in Europe, especially in the Soviet theater, and in China. One of the reasons why the Soviet Union's Red Army was so legendary was that they were able to pursue the Germans all the way from deep in Russia to Berlin. But what most people don't realize is that what gave the Red Army the capacity to go from so far in Russia to Berlin were American Jeeps and Studebakers, supplied to Russia through a form of the Lend-Lease program. And that's something that many Russians are very loath to admit to this day. Russia and Japan never signed a formal peace treaty after the war, so hostilities between the two nations technically still exist up to this day. An attempt at a peace treaty, which was revamped in 2000, failed because Russia refused to give back 4 islands off the north coast of Japan, which had been taken during World War II. The resolve of the Japanese people to never surrender became legendary in World War II. However, the extent of that resolve can be fully demonstrated by the tale of a man named Hiro Onoda. I'm sorry for butchering the pronunciation. Hiro Onoda was on the Pacific island of Lubang, and he never was aware that the Japanese had surrendered to the United States. He finally came out of the jungles of Lubang in 1974, over 29 years after Japan had surrendered. He never received word, and he did not give up for that whole time. Winston Churchill had a plan to beat the Nazis from the start, but his plan would come as a surprise to many people, and it came as a surprise to me more than anything because it came from this book, which has a British author. Churchill's grand plan for the war, as he confided to his son in 1940, was to drag the United States in. Most people know that the Soviet Union bore the brunt of the casualties from World War I, with over 21 million people dying. But few people realize the scope and the scale of just how many Russians died. And here's a little statistic that throws it into highlight. 4 out of 5 Russian males born in the year 1923 were dead by the end of World War II. The most highly decorated American regiment of all time was the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, who served in World War II. Their motto was "Go for Broke," and they were composed of entirely Japanese-American volunteers. What a lot of people don't realize is Adolf Hitler had a male heir, his elder half-brother's son, William Patrick Hitler. As to why his name is William Patrick Hitler, well, his mother was Irish, and he was raised in England. William Patrick Hitler moved to Nazi Germany in an attempt to get a good job, but moved to America with his mother after a falling out with his uncle. Hitler would serve in the U.S. Navy, win a Purple Heart, and eventually would change his name to Stuart Houston after the war.